Hi guys, welcome back to our channel. The first thing we want to do, of course, is thank our wonderful Patreon patrons for all of your support. And thank you so much for all the Etsy support this week as well. We really appreciate it. Today we're going to dive into another hopefully thought-provoking discussion, this time about the documentary Poisoned on Netflix.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about this documentary Poisoned, especially amongst some of the vegans in our friend circle and family circle. And so we wanted to ask the question, is this documentary a vegan documentary, or does this documentary promote a vegan message? So what we want to do is we want to talk a little bit about the movie in general, then we're going to give you guys a spoiler warning, and then we'll go more in depth about the movie, going into detail about what happens in the movie. If you haven't seen it first, we recommend you watch it first before the spoiler talk. But let's get started with the non-spoiler review. So, Anna, is this documentary a vegan documentary?
Are we answering the question right now, or giving it away right now?
Well, are you guys going to click away if we just answer it right off the bat?
It is definitely not a vegan documentary. However, I have been hearing that a lot of people have been motivated to go vegan after watching this documentary.
You could argue that what is said in the documentary might promote a more plant-based diet. Might, because there are some things that happen in the film that are perplexing in that regard. No one says the word vegan in the documentary. No one identifies as a vegan.
I think that's because they're not.
Yeah. It's
surprisingly.
Yeah. It largely focuses on the main lawyer who was suing Jack in the Box back in the 90s when there was an E. coli outbreak in Washington State at a Jack in the Box restaurant. I would say he's probably the main focus of the documentary.
Yeah, I would say the main through line.
We sort of go back in time and watch that case from the 90s unfold, and then we follow him through to today and all the work that he's done over the last 30, 40 years.
So if we were to sum up the plot of this documentary, we would say that it primarily focuses on the topic of food safety in the United States.
They repeat that line that so many politicians and so many executives and so many CEOs and presidents of companies have said, that the United States has the world's safest food system. We have the safest food system on the planet. Now, when that many politicians and CEOs say something, you know it's bullshit. I don't think we nor anyone should be under the guise that like the United States food system is totally perfectly safe, given that we still have like Salmonella and E. coli, and we get recalls all the time. Like food gets recalled, outbreaks happen, people get sick.
We are no strangers to foodborne illnesses.
Yeah.
Not we.
The United States.
The United States. Just look it up. Every week there's a recall on some product.
We thought perhaps this might be something similar to like Earthlings or Dominion, where they might show some like slaughterhouse footage or factory farm footage that's uncomfortable to watch. And if you're worried about that sort of thing, if you're sensitive to that sort of thing, I would say don't be, because there's none of that footage really in this documentary.
No, and I would say disappointingly so.
So Anna, now that we know it's not a vegan documentary, and you and I are both vegan activists on YouTube, would we still recommend that people watch Poisoned?
I think we would.
Mm-hmm. So overall, yes. Did we enjoy the documentary? Yes. Do we think you should watch it? Yes. Is it a vegan documentary, or does it promote a vegan message? No.
We're going to go into the spoiler review right now, so if you haven't watched it, go watch it and come back. So the documentary begins with this look back at the 1990s, where there was this massive E. coli outbreak in Washington State. Children were ending up in the hospitals. They didn't know what was happening, what was going on, where they were getting sick from, until they traced it back to Jack in the Box.
That's kind of where the documentary starts. Like we said, we follow the lawyer who was assigned to this case. We also follow the father of one of the children that died from the E. coli outbreak.
Yeah, E. coli is no fun. It's a very, very serious and dangerous illness. E. coli has these Shiga toxins. It sounds like you're saying sugar, but it's Shiga. Shiga toxins that deposit into your gut, and they start killing blood cells, which then causes organ failure. It pretty much starts eating you from the inside out.
Yeah, and looking at it now in 2023, obviously everyone has heard of E. coli. Everyone knows that E. coli is bad, but in the 90s, no one had heard of it. I mean, we lived through it. We are old enough to remember the 90s.
Yeah.
And we remember like experiencing this brand new thing. And then I remember it was immediately associated with hamburgers. Don't eat beef, it has E. coli. Like that became an immediate connection. And apparently, the lawyer in this documentary, they went through the court cases and eventually got to the point where it's illegal for any beef in any place to have E. coli in it, which is different than salmonella, which is crazy.
It's nuts. Salmonella is also very dangerous. My mom is actually a survivor. She contracted it from an omelet on an American Airlines flight. She literally texted me 2 days later and said, I almost died. And I was like, oh, haha, she must be talking about like she almost died of laughter or she almost, something like that. And she told me about this harrowing experience. It's very, very dangerous. Mm-hmm. And she had to go to the hospital. A major part of this documentary focuses on the whole taking responsibility. There is not a single entity that is responsible for foodborne illnesses. Like, no one is there to take accountability. In my mom's case, American Airlines didn't even want to offer her a voucher. They were so, this is not our problem. It was bonkers.
An interesting parallel was watching the whole E. coli lawsuit take place. E. coli is now illegal to be, it was legal at one point for beef to have E. coli in it. Mm-hmm. And in fact, during this case, that was the pushback from the opposing side, was that like, hey, listen, beef has bacteria in it. It has E. coli in it. It's your job as a consumer to cook it out of the beef.
Yeah.
It's not our fault that the beef has E. coli in it. Now they're trying to get salmonella banned from being in chicken and egg products because they said the number one cause of salmonella is chicken or eggs. Chicken being the number one reason why people get sick from salmonella. And salmonella is legally allowed to be in chicken. And it's your job as the consumer and your job as the restaurant owner to cook it out of the chicken.
And let me tweak that phrase and rephrase it. It is your fault if you get salmonella.
Yeah.
That is what these industries want to put out there to the consumer because they are not responsible. Let's look at the whole the Peanut Corporation.
Yeah, so that was the next big
moly.
lawsuit. So the Peanut Corporation of America, I think is what they were called,
yeah.
which supplies like peanut paste and peanut powder
and
to
peanut butter and peanuts
to a huge variety of companies. They supply all the peanuts.
Do they still exist?
I don't know if they still exist. We should look that up.
Was a peanut processing business, which is now defunct as a result of one of the most massive and lethal foodborne contamination events in U.S. history. And boy, was it. The first thing was a whistleblower of the American Peanut Corporation started documenting all these horrid instances of contamination. I mean, we're talking mice, rats, feces, leaks in the ceiling that were then bringing in bird poop from the outside in.
And the CEO was unwilling to do anything about it. He knew that there were problems and he was unwilling to do anything about it because it was going to cost him some money to fix the problems. The CEO of the Peanut Corporation, he just told them to ship out shipments of peanuts that were testing positive for salmonella. He knew they were testing positive for salmonella.
They were whiting out the dates on they were falsifying the documents so that they could get those peanuts out. And what happened? So many people got sick. Yeah. So many people got sick. And this freaking guy ended up, how many years in prison?
I think he got 28 years in jail. And the whistleblower said, like, in his mind, that's murder.
Yeah.
Because he knew that the product was contaminated. He knew that this salmonella can kill people, and he still shipped out the peanuts, knowing that they were positive for salmonella. At one point, the president of Jack in the Box is being interviewed on TV, and they asked him, like, did you knowingly break the law and undercook the meat or not follow the right protocols? And he says, why would any business not follow the law? I mean, I can think of 1 million reasons why.
Most of them have dollar signs attached to them. Yes,
exactly. The CEO of the Peanut Corporation clearly showed you why they would break the law, because it was going to cost him a lot of money. He was going to have to throw away all that supply. Like all of that contaminated supply of peanuts was going to have to go in the trash.
Yeah.
They were going to have to completely sanitize and clean and revamp and probably like rebuild that building.
Gross looking establishment.
It would have been a huge amount of money. So yeah, he just shipped it out.
I don't know what people think is going to happen. Let's ignore the problem.
Maybe it'll just go away.
Yeah. We get to this other part where we start talking about leafy greens, particularly romaine lettuce, which we know has been the subject of many a foodborne illness recalls. Same with spinach. It turns out that most of the leafy greens, particularly romaine lettuce,
Romaine seems to get recalled all the time.
the vast majority of leafy greens that are exported, that are produced in the United States, are produced in California and in Arizona, in two particular locations. One of the things that always irked me when I would be watching the news and I would hear about these recalls is that it pretty much just states the surface level of the problem. This product is being recalled due to a salmonella or listeria, sometimes contamination. And that's the end of it. And we always think, well, tell the consumer why. There was a line in this documentary. It was probably the most important line in the entire documentary. The line was by Dr. Oz, whom we are not huge fans of.
No, we're no Dr. Oz stans, but he does say the smartest thing in the documentary.
And that is, and I quote, "It's not the lettuce's fault, it's the livestock." Boom! And there we enter into what we think is the most vegan portion of the documentary. Romaine lettuce doesn't just have salmonella or listeria. It comes from somewhere.
Yes, as we've spoken about many times on this channel, if you've watched the documentary Speciesism, when you have a bunch of animals concentrated into a concentrated animal feed operation, also known as a CAFO, when you have all of these cows or pigs or chickens grouped together in a warehouse or grouped together on these like dirt fields, they have to go to the bathroom, and they have to go to the bathroom a lot, and there are a lot of animals. And that has to go somewhere, and usually it goes into these drainage pits or drainage ponds known as lagoons. And then what happens is those lagoons fill up with animal waste that's mixed with water and urine and blood, and I'm sure all sorts of other bodily fluids and liquids that are coming out of these CAFOs. And so what happens is they take that liquid and they spray it everywhere. It turns out that a lot of romaine lettuce and spinach are grown near CAFOs. We've been talking about that for a long time.
Near was an understatement.
Yeah.
Like it was across it was like a trench or a river or something.
Yeah. Crazy that never gets brought up. That, oh, the reason why romaine lettuce has salmonella is because it's sprayed with chicken all the time. That's never addressed.
No.
It's always just, oh, just pull the romaine lettuce off the grocery store shelves and be scared of romaine lettuce and don't buy romaine lettuce.
There is produce that is more dangerous to consume than other produce.
So they go on to tell you like what you should avoid, like avoid the prepackaged salads, the mixed greens, the power greens, because you don't know how many heads of lettuce or how many different plants are involved when they do those prepackaged stuff. Yeah. It could be like a bunch of different heads of lettuce from a bunch of different fields, and that just like ups the chances of it being contaminated versus buying one head of lettuce and washing it yourself at home.
And that's the other risk. You can't cook off the bacteria in produce. So produce bears the bad name for the fault of these animal agriculture operations.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate because that is true. It is true that there are certain produce that you should avoid, but it's true because we're farming animals. There's nothing wrong with eating romaine lettuce per se. It's not the lettuce's fault. There's nothing in the lettuce that's bad for you. It's what gets sprayed onto the lettuce and then contaminates it.
Speaking of farming animals, let's talk about that little section with the chicken, Purdue in particular.
My mouth was agape and I was in awe during this section when this text came up and said like Purdue agreed to let us into their facility and film an interview with them and stuff. I was like, hold on.
Yeah, what is this odd instance of transparency?
Yeah,
we're about to enter.
What are we going to see? They did do an interview with like the VP of food safety at Purdue or something. I forget his exact title. Then they showed a few things behind the scenes at Purdue. What they were presenting as something positive was the section where the baby chicks get hatched and then they get put on a conveyor belt and they get like sprayed with some blue disinfectant liquid or something. I don't even know what it was. Like,
not positive to me.
No. They thought it was positive.
Yeah, they thought it was positive, but literally we're watching a baby chick hatch surrounded by other baby chicks in a crate. Yeah. Where should baby chicks hatch? Maybe perhaps underneath their mother.
They're incubated in like a room, and then they all hatch in these plastic crates that get stacked on top of each other. Then those get dumped out onto a conveyor belt, and these day-old, like 3 hours old sentient beings get dumped onto a conveyor belt, and then they get like sorted.
Yeah.
And they were just like tossed by this conveyor belt into a few different lanes, and then they got sprayed with some sort of blue liquid, and then they got like dumped onto a truck. And then they get taken to the chicken farm where they will be allowed to live for 45 days. That's an actual quote from the guy who works for Purdue. We've said it a million times on this channel. If you eat chicken, you are eating a 6-week-old baby. These chickens are 45 days old when they get killed. But they don't show that in this documentary.
No, we skip straight to the 2-week-old chickens. And they're looking a little big for 2 weeks old. As we know, they're plumped up real fast to get them to the slaughterhouse quicker. Less money spent, the faster they grow. Then we skip straight to the carcasses. Yep. There's no slaughter footage whatsoever. How convenient, right? Yeah. Transparency.
Just the imagery of... He was very proud. He was like, these are our boneless, skinless chicken breasts here coming up. And like the goopy, sloppy, like... chicken flesh that was just like hanging off of this conveyor belt was just like it didn't look like food. It's crazy that we put that in our bodies for as long as we did until we went vegan, and it's crazy that people still put that in their bodies. So
what are all these people doing that are being interviewed? The father who lost his child, the lawyer, the legal, there was a congresswoman as well. You have this group of people in the documentary who are fighting to change the law to get salmonella out of the market. And I just want to skip to the end of the documentary because that, to me, to us, was the most mind-blowing part of it all. If you guys,
I don't know if you guys caught like our last video, we covered our Changing Climates video about is veganism really the answer? So a lot of incredible factual information, and then the lesson that's taken from that information is the wrong lesson. Mental gymnastics, taking away the wrong lesson from this information.
Yeah.
This documentary is the same way. You have a father who lost his son because his son ate a hamburger that had E. coli in it.
You have the couple, too, whose daughter almost died.
There was a couple whose 17-year-old daughter got salmonella, I think, from a salad.
And is still, to this day, suffering from near kidney failure.
And she might have to have her kidneys replaced. Like, she might have to have a kidney transplant.
Yeah.
And possibly be on dialysis for her entire life because she got salmonella poisoning. They get to the end of the documentary. They ask all of these individuals, are there any foods that you avoid now knowing what you know about the food industry? And the father, the first food he lists is cantaloupe. He says cantaloupe is bad because the knife touches the skin of the cantaloupe and then the meat of the cantaloupe. So you immediately, if there's anything on the skin of the cantaloupe, it immediately goes into the meat of the cantaloupe and then you would eat that.
Now, granted, like we said, it's a real thing.
It's true. Okay, it's true.
But I would say the first thing out of my mouth would have been chicken.
Yes.
Yes. But the lawyer, he made sure to tell his waiter to cook his burger patty at 155 degrees.
Which, by the way, the whole thing about the E. coli outbreak was that Jack in the Box was ordered by Washington state regulations to cook their hamburger patties to 155 degrees. They chose not to. They knew that their patties were undercooked.
They were receiving customer complaints that were being relayed to them by employees. And their response was, well, if we overcook the burger patty, it will be too tough.
You can put the regulation in place. Like, I can tell the waiter, like, cook my burger to 155 degrees, and then what? And just trust that they do it? Like, did you learn
anything?
Nothing. From the past 30 years of your career.
So here you have a group of people that, as was suggested in the climate change documentary, you have a group of people working from the top down to try to get these laws passed. Got to get through a lot of red tape, especially with these major animal ag corporations that just are willing to pay out a lot of money. I mean, we saw it in the case of the former USDA what was her title?
Oh, she was the undersecretary?
Yeah, and she was in charge of food safety and at the same time was getting a ton of grant money from all the animal ag companies.
Now, she claimed she was getting that money to do research.
Sure. So you have all these people working from the top down. But the one thing that would really impact these industries, the animal ag industries, is if you stopped purchasing the product. We like to promote action from the consumer. That is we have the most power.
Like, if you were to tell me, hey, Brian, I would like you to go change the law so that Salmonella is now illegal to be, tested in chicken before it hits the grocery store shelves. I don't know how, I wouldn't know. I mean, I could try. I could get together a group of people and try to make that happen, and maybe with enough years and enough lawyers, maybe we could pull it off, and enough money. But if you just told me, hey, Brian, next time you go to the grocery store, don't buy chicken, that's easy. You can do that. And there are endless plant-based chicken alternatives on the grocery store shelves.
So these people are actively supporting the industries that are the cause of the problem. People will fight so hard to continue eating this stuff. It's bizarre. This is how strong the addiction is. It's like saying, jump into that snake pit. If you get bit, we have some anti-venom, but you could die. Why not just not jump into the snake pit? People are jumping into the snake pit and hoping that nothing happens. Remember, it is your responsibility, ultimately, to stay safe. The USDA, they're not doing anything. They're just playing a game of hot potato.
Yeah, earlier in the documentary, when they were interviewing the Purdue safety officer, they said the makers of the documentary had gone to 5 different grocery stores and bought 5 different samples of Purdue Chicken and tested them all for Salmonella. One of them came back positive, so that's 20%. Now, it's a very small sample. It's only 5 samples. They asked him, what do you think about that? And he's like, well, it's just one bird. That's really not fair. And they said, well, what do you think a good sample size would be? And he said, well, you'd have to test at least 150 birds. So then they tested 150, and they went and got 150 samples of chicken from a variety of grocery stores. Some were Purdue, some were not Purdue. They reveal at the end of the documentary, out of all 150, 17% tested positive for Salmonella. Out of all of the Purdue chicken that was tested, 29% tested positive for Salmonella. They really made a point in this documentary, multiple people said, chicken is bad. Don't buy chicken. Don't bring chicken into your house. Eating chicken is dangerous. You have to treat, one guy even said, treat chicken like it's a biohazardous material in your kitchen.
Because don't forget, Salmonella, once it dries, it can live on your surfaces for many days.
And then my mind just flashes forward to the end where they say, is there a single food you avoid? Why, no one said chicken. No one said chicken. You just watch the cognitive dissonance happen in real time.
Don't support the industries that are causing the problem.
If you were to ask us, are there any foods you guys avoid at the grocery store? We would have a list of products that we don't buy way ahead of romaine lettuce. Granted, we don't buy chicken because we don't think it's ethical to needlessly kill chickens in order to eat their corpses. But also, if you're just looking at it from a food safety point of view, and which food is most dangerous on grocery store shelves, it would have to be where the Salmonella comes from, wouldn't it?
And how do we solve this problem from the top down? More testing? More sanitary conditions? That's going to cost farmers a lot of money. They're not going to like that. They're going to fight that. Going back to the old ways of farming? Can't do that. 8 billion people to feed. So what really is the answer here? Other than don't buy chicken. Don't buy animal products. Don't support those industries. They don't care about you. They don't care about anyone.
There's an organization called the LGMA that is supposed to make sure that the leafy greens in the United States are salmonella-free, listeria-free. They're supposed to be testing these leafy greens before they go hit grocery store shelves. The CEO was like, yes, I definitely think that we have reduced outbreaks of salmonella. And they were like, do you have any studies or any data to back that up at all? And he's like, no, I can't think of a single study, but I believe that we are making a difference.
And so then the interviewer goes on to read multiple recalls that occurred. They're like, what do you think about that? And he said something like, it's certainly unfortunate the effect that these outbreak incidents had on consumers.
Yeah.
Something very dry, very stilted.
Very corporate.
Used the word consumer, not people.
The thing that they made clear with the peanut corporation segment was these corporations, they get so corporatized in their mindset that they forget that what they're actually selling is going to be put into the mouths of children. It just becomes a product that they're shipping to a consumer, like a coffee mug or a roll of duct tape or something. Like, this is our product and we ship it to the consumer. If you sell food, that is a huge responsibility that they are unwilling to, take. And I guess the documentary concludes with them, they're trying to put forward, or he did put forward a bill trying to eliminate salmonella, or at least some types of salmonella.
Some types.
From chicken and eggs on grocery store shelves. We'll see where that goes. But guys, just the takeaway from this documentary has to be that salmonella is legally allowed to be in chicken and eggs. And it is your job as the consumer to cook it out of the chicken and the eggs. They're allowed to give you a deadly illness.
And if you get it, who's paying the medical bills? Whose fault is it, according to these corporations?
It won't be theirs. It's wild.
Those are our thoughts on Poisoned, which is a very, very good factual documentary with a very underwhelming outcome. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section.
And as always, a huge thank you to all of our patrons on Patreon. We so appreciate your support. And if you're not yet a patron on Patreon, but you watch the channel, if you like our content, if you like what we have to say, please consider becoming a patron. The link is down below.
And this is our last year for our Etsy store. Everything on there must go, will be gone by the end of the year. My shirt today started a conversation with this lady who was like, I like your shirt. I'm also vegan.
That's
so cute.
That's a certain age bracket, I feel like.
Yeah.
Because my grandparents also pronounce it vegan.
Yeah. You never know what conversation it might spark, and if you might find someone in your community who is also vegan or what activism could come of it.
Until the next video, guys.